Hello, everyone. Welcome to the IB Econ Guru. Okay, I don't know what just happened, but welcome. First of all, I wanted to apologize for what happened on Saturday. I had a family emergency and I couldn't attend at the regular time, but I did promise you all a live stream that would review price elasticity of demand, income elasticity of demand, and price elasticity of supply. So, in the video description below, you'll find a lot of links to my blog, ways you can support the channel, and basically the information where I got this, the textbook, sorry, where I got this information from. So I'm in a new place because I'm sort of out of town, once again, visiting family, dealing with some family issues, let's just say. But I'm still here to help you review price elasticity of demand, price elasticity of supply, and income elasticity of demand. So let's get started. So I'm going to start with price elasticity of demand. All right. Price elasticity of demand is basically a measure of the responsiveness of quantity demanded to changes in price. According to the law of demand, when price rises, quantity demanded falls. When price falls, quantity demanded rises. Notice I'm saying quantity demanded, not demand, because demand is not affected by price. Demand as a whole is affected by the non-price determinants, right? So price elasticity of demand is a measure of how responsive quantity demanded is to changes in price, okay? So what we're going to do is I'm going to talk about how PED is measured. So very quickly, PED, measure of responsiveness of quantity demanded to changes in price. Thank you very much, Lila. I just saw your comment. Thank you, Lila. Hope you're having a good spring break. All right. So PED is a measure of the responsiveness of quantity demanded to changes in price. It is measured by dividing the percentage change in quantity demanded divided by the percentage change in price. Basically, Q2 minus Q1 divided by Q1 times 100. This is the top part of the equation. P2 minus P1 divided by P1 times 100. This is how we calculate price elasticity of demand. Remember, the law of demand tells us that when price rises, quantity demanded falls, and when price falls, quantity demanded rises. So the law of demand already tells us that there's a negative relationship. We know that PED will always be negative because there is a negative relationship. What PED measures is to what extent will quantity demanded respond. So to what degree will quantity demanded respond? Quantity demanded respond to changes in price. Okay, so have a look here, for example, price inelastic demand. You'll see in this example, price rose from P1 to P2 by 10%. But in response to the rise in price, quantity demanded decreased only by 5%. Here you can see that the change in quantity demanded is less than proportionate. We look at proportions here. It's less than proportionate to the change in price. All right, the percentage change in quantity demanded is smaller than the percentage change in price. Remember, we look at percentage changes, not absolute changes. Here we say demand is price inelastic. So this is price inelastic demand, and the value of the PED will lie between 0 and 1. Remember, we're talking about absolute value. Okay? So you ignore the negative sign because PED will always be negative. There is a negative relationship. While if you look here, for example, a 5% rise in price caused a more than proportionate fall in quantity demanded. Okay, the percentage change in QD was greater than the percentage change in price. Here we say that the change in quantity demanded is more than proportionate. All right, remember to use those words, more than proportionate to the change in quantity demanded is more than proportionate to the change in price. And here, demand is said to be price elastic. Price elasticity of demand, the value will lie between 1 and infinity. Again, remember we're talking about the absolute value. We ignore the negative sign. Okay, so these are the frequently encountered cases. You have price inelastic demand, where elasticity is less than 1, between 0 and 1. We ignore the negative sign. Or price elastic demand, where elasticity is between 1 and infinity. We ignore the negative sign. Remember the words, key terms I want you to remember. Less than proportionate when you're talking about price inelastic demand, and more than proportionate. Don't use bigger or smaller. Don't say the change in quantity is bigger than the change in price. No, it's more than proportionate to the change in price. That's more accurate, okay? Because we look at percentages, not absolute numerical changes. All right, now there are some special cases, okay? Unit elastic demand is when PED is equal to 1. This happens when the percentage change in quantity is proportionate to the percentage change in price, okay? Percentage change in quantity demanded is proportionate to the percentage change in price. Maybe I should say, sorry, maybe I should say the change in quantity, okay? So the change, not the percentage, because I'm already saying proportion. The change in quantity demanded is proportionate to the change in price, okay? If price rises by 10%, quantity demanded falls by 10%. If price falls by 15%, quantity demanded rises by 15%. The proportions are always the same, okay? This is called unit elastic demand. And then there are two extreme cases, which are more hypothetical than you have perfectly inelastic demand, where PED equals 0. That means the quantity demanded is fixed. It doesn't respond to changes in price, okay? The percentage change in quantity demanded is 0. Quantity demanded is fixed. Like, for example, someone who gets insulin for their managing their diabetes, okay? They're going to consume the same amount of insulin regardless of price, right? Their consumption of insulin is not responsive to changes in price. It depends on their doctor's prescription, how much insulin they need, right? So perfectly inelastic demand. And then perfectly elastic demand, there's a missing R here. Perfectly elastic demand when PED is equal to infinity. Here, the percentage change in price is 0. Okay, price is fixed. Okay, whatever quantity, quantity can be anything, but the price is fixed. It doesn't change. Okay, so here, PED is equal to infinity. The point is, quantity demanded is infinitely responsive to changes in price. Price is fixed, quantity demanded changes or is determined by other factors, okay? So what are the determinants of price elasticity of demand? Well, number one is the availability and closeness of substitutes, okay? If there are lots of substitutes and they're all close substitutes, demand will be more price elastic. If the product has no close substitutes, demand will be very price inelastic, okay? So remember, more close substitutes means more elastic demand. Less close substitutes, the product has very little or no substitutes, demand will be more inelastic, price inelastic. So this is number one. The first determinant is availability and closeness of substitutes. The second one is the proportion of income spent on the product, okay? If the product is expensive, which means it takes up a large proportion of income, okay? Hi, Muhammad, thank you. I really appreciate the compliment. Welcome. I'm reviewing PED, YED, and PES right now. So I'm glad you're welcome to join us, and thank you very much for the compliment. So If a product is expensive, which means it takes up a large proportion of the consumer's income, demand will be more price elastic. If the product is cheap, it doesn't take up much of the consumer's income, the consumer will be less sensitive to price changes. Okay, they will barely even notice. Like, think of how much people spend on, so smokers, for example, think of how much they spend on cigarettes, which are much more expensive because of high taxes, as they should be because they're demerit goods, versus matches. If the price of matches changes, people won't even notice because they're very cheap. But the price of the pack of cigarettes, okay, obviously they'll be more responsive to that. Okay, so this is the second determinant of PED, proportion of income. So the first determinant is the availability and closeness of substitutes. Second determinant is proportion of income. The third determinant is the degree of necessity. Okay, how necessary this product is to the consumer. If the product is a necessity, maybe because it's habit forming or addictive as well. Remember, I'm not claiming that cigarettes are necessities, right? I'm not encouraging you to smoke, but I'm saying that for a smoker, an addicted smoker, cigarettes are addictive. Therefore, they are, from their perspective, a necessity. Their demand will be very inelastic, not very responsive to changes in price. While if the product is a luxury, not habit forming, not addictive, on the other hand, demand will be relatively more elastic. Okay, so the degree of necessity is another determinant of PED. The last determinant is time period. And here we distinguish between the short run and the long run. Okay, consumers have sticky habits. Okay, consumers do not adapt to changes in prices right away. It takes some time for consumers to adapt to price changes. So in the short run, consumer demand is often very price inelastic in the short run. Why? Because when price changes, it takes time for consumers to adjust their spending and consumption habits. While in the long run, because they search for cheaper substitutes and they start to look for other brands or other products that can fulfill the same need, demand becomes more elastic in the long run, price elastic. So these are the four main determinants of price elasticity of demand. Number one, the availability and closeness of substitutes. Number two, the proportion of income, whether the product is expensive or cheap, whether the product has a lot of close substitutes or no or few close substitutes. The degree of necessity, whether it's a necessity or habit forming or addictive versus a luxury, not habit forming, and the period of time, short run versus long run. Okay, feel free to leave comments and questions in the comments. I mean, this is a live stream. I'd love to interact with you guys, and thank you very much for joining us and supporting the channel. This was supposed to be on Saturday, but I had a family emergency. This Saturday, I'll be continuing at our regular time. So this is just to make up for the lost session on Saturday. Okay, so I also wanted to talk about a straight line demand curve. Okay, some people think that because a straight line demand curve has constant slope, yes, the slope of a straight line is constant. That doesn't mean that price elasticity of demand is constant along a straight line demand curve. Okay, so here you've got a demand curve, and you can even take some of these numbers to verify what I'm about to tell you, right? If you want to calculate the elasticity between these numbers, you can do that. I'm not going to do that, but the point is, at high prices, okay, so the range of prices where the product is expensive, demand will be more elastic, okay? So elastic demand at high prices. Why? Because when a product is expensive, it takes up a bigger proportion of consumer income. Therefore, consumers are more sensitive or responsive to changes in price. And at low prices here, when you calculate PED, demand is more inelastic, okay? This is the inelastic portion of the demand curve. So remember, there is inelastic demand at low prices, okay? At the midpoint, demand is unit elastic, okay? And you can verify if you take these numbers, if you want to take these numbers here and calculate PED, you'll get a PED of 4. these numbers, you'll get a PED of 1, and these numbers, you'll get a PED of 0.25. The point is, when the product is expensive at very high prices, demand is likely to be more price elastic. At low prices, demand is more price inelastic. At the midpoint of the demand curve, demand is unit elastic. So this is one thing I want you to remember. Just because a demand curve is a straight line that has a constant slope, it doesn't mean that price elasticity of demand is constant. It's just the slope that is constant. But PED varies along a straight line demand curve. At high prices, demand is more price elastic. At the midpoint, demand is unit elastic. At low prices, demand is more price inelastic. Okay? Remember that this is a concept that we revisit again when we talk about market power, especially when we talk about revenue, the relationship between total revenue, average revenue, and marginal revenue. All right, so revenue, something we need to talk about. Remember, total revenue is equal to P times Q, price times quantity. Okay, here you see a relatively elastic demand curve. So here, PED is greater than 1. The absolute value is greater than 1. All right, let's see. When price was 4, quantity was 11. So 4 times 11 is $44. That was the total revenue at 4. When price rose to 5, quantity demanded decreased to 8. 5 times 8 is 40. Okay, you'll see that here, when the price rose, total revenue fell. So when demand is elastic, a rise in price will lead to a decrease in total revenue. Therefore, a fall in price will lead to an increase in total revenue. So when demand is elastic, to increase total revenue, the producer should lower the price. Why? Look here, okay? We have box A, which is here, box B, which is this, and box C. Box C, maybe I should use a different color, is the increase in total revenue as a result of the increase in price. It's the gain in total revenue due to the increase in price. While box B is the loss of the total revenue due to a decrease in quantity. Okay? It seems that the loss of total revenue, box B, is greater than box C. So the loss of revenue due to a decrease, loss of total revenue, exceeds the gain in total revenue due to the rise in price. So the point is, when demand is elastic, to increase total revenue, the producer should lower the price, offer a discount, offer a promotion. Let's see when demand is inelastic, okay? So here, when price was 5, quantity was 14. So 5 times 10 is 50, 5 times 4 is 20, so $70, that was the total revenue. When price rose to 7, okay, quantity demanded fell to 12. So 7 times 12, 7 times 10, 70, 7 times 2 is $84. So here you can see increasing the price actually led to an increase in total revenue. Why? Because the gain in total revenue, box C, the gain in total revenue as a result of charging a higher price exceeds the loss of total revenue as a result of selling a lower quantity. Because C is greater than B, C is the gain in total revenue, B is the loss of total revenue. Here, the main idea is when demand is inelastic, okay, when demand is inelastic, to increase total revenue, producer should raise the price. That's the idea. So when demand is elastic, to increase total revenue, the producer should lower the price. When demand is inelastic, to increase total revenue, the producer should raise the price. And this is how PED can be useful for producers and business decision making. It helps businesses in making decisions like which products to offer a discount or a promotion or a sales promotion on, and which products should be kept at like a high price point. So products with inelastic demand, you should not offer a sales promotion on that, while products with elastic demand, so clothes, for example, if you go to like a big clothes retail store, the products that are kind of like staples, like, you know, plain t-shirts, for example, or whatever, they often have inelastic demand because people demand them all year round, like undershirts, maybe socks, and so on. They have very inelastic demand. Well, products that are seasonal, right? So like t-shirts that are seasonal, by the end of the season, they're already sort of, not trendy or out of fashion or out of season, right? So demand becomes much more elastic at the end of the season, and that's why they offer discounts and promotions to try and get rid of these clothes before the season ends, okay, or before the next season begins, okay? So keep this in mind. And when demand is unit elastic, because the percentage change in quantity will always be equal to the percentage change in price, any change in price will be matched by a proportionate change in quantity, and total revenue doesn't change. So here, P1 Q1 is exactly equal to P2 Q2. The change in revenue is 0. Okay, change in total revenue is equal to 0. Why? Because every rise in price will be matched by a proportionate change in quantity. Okay, so these are the things you should remember. I talked about the definition of PED, the formula used to calculate PED, the 5 different scenarios. Remember to use words like less than proportionate and more than proportionate, not bigger or smaller. So if you're talking about price inelastic demand, the change in quantity demanded is less than proportionate to the change in price. If you're talking about elastic demand, the change in quantity demanded is more than proportionate to the change in price. And remember the relationship that on a straight line demand curve, elasticity is not constant. Elasticity changes along a straight line demand curve. At high prices, demand is more price elastic. At low prices, demand is more price inelastic. And the total revenue boxes. All right, let's talk about YED. So YED is a measure of responsiveness or sensitivity of demand to changes in income. Income is denoted Y, not I. I often stands for investment, which is a macroeconomic thing. Changes in income. So YED, it's not IED, remember that, it's YED, is the percentage change in quantity demanded divided by the percentage change in Y, which is income, which is equal to Q2 minus Q1 divided by Q1 times 100. All of this divided by Y2 minus Y1 divided by Y1 times 100. This is how we calculate YED. Okay, so YED is often positive, okay, positive for normal goods. Okay, so YED, let me just first, is positive for normal goods and negative for inferior goods. Normal goods, we split them into 2 categories. If it's positive but greater than 1 versus positive but less than 1. It will be greater than 1, which means this product is very income elastic. Okay, income elastic in the case of what we call luxury goods and services. And it will be income inelastic, so positive but less than 1, income inelastic in the case of what we call necessities. So remember, positive YED means this is a normal good. If it's greater than 1, means this product is a luxury or a service. If it's less than 1, means this product is a necessity. If YED is negative, then this product is an inferior good. And we use the Engel curve to represent these relationships. So here you have income per week and the quantity of hot dogs. Okay, if the Engel curve is positively sloping, but relatively flat, then YED is greater than 1. This is a luxury good or a service. If the Engel curve is positively sloping, but relatively steep, that means YED is less than 1. This is in the case of a necessity. If the Engel curve is completely horizontal, that means YED is 0. Demand does not respond to changes in income. Okay, so here, and if the Engel curve is negatively sloping, this portion here from D to E, that means income elasticity of demand, YED, is negative. Less than 0 means negative, and this is an inferior good. Okay, so remember, YED is not always a characteristic of the good itself. It depends on the consumer. So maybe for me, I earn a high enough income where hot dogs are an inferior good. If my income increases, I'm not going to go and buy more hot dogs. I'm going to go out to fancy gourmet restaurants, right? While maybe, I don't know, like a high school student or a college student on a budget trying to save money because they're paying off student loans or whatever, to them, hot dogs might be more of a necessity. They have more income, inelastic demand, right? So my point is, it depends on the consumer. But we use the angle curve to show these, okay? So from A to B at low income, maybe hot dogs might be that's not what we're trying to say. No. Okay. So think of these as different angle curves rather than, I mean, obviously, a consumer with very low income, a hot dog, a consumer who's very poor, like homeless, or very poor, a hot dog might be a luxury or a service. And then they reach a level of income where hot dogs become necessities. And then they reach a level of income where, any increase in income does not affect their demand for hot dog. And then now that they earn a high enough income, they go and they eat sort of better food, right? So the angle curve can show you how, as income increases, demand responds to changes, okay, in this income. Remember, the angle curve is not a demand curve. The demand curve is a relationship between price and quantity demanded. The angle curve is a curve showing the relationship between income and quantity demanded, okay? So the angle curve is used to show how income elasticity of demand changes as income increases. It can be used to show if a good is normal or inferior, and if it's a necessity or a luxury or a service. Okay, price elasticity of supply. Okay, so now I finished PED and YED. Price elasticity of supply, PES, is a measure of the responsiveness of quantity supplied to changes, delta S changes in price. Okay, so PES is equal to percentage delta QS divided by percentage delta P, which is basically QS2 minus QS1 divided by QS1 times 100. All of this divided by P2 minus P1 divided by P1 times 100. Okay? PES is basically how easy or difficult it is for a producer to adjust quantity supplied. Okay? When price rises, not all producers can just respond by increasing quantity supplied or increasing production the next day, right? Production requires planning. They might need to go and employ more workers. They might need to go and buy more raw materials. The point is, supply isn't always completely responsive to changes in price. Some products, it's easy for the producer to just, produce and sell more the next day. Some products is very difficult. Like, think of a farmer. If the price of tomatoes rises, the tomato farmer can't just grow tomatoes overnight. They're going to have to wait till it's season, right? So supply in the short run is likely to be very price inelastic. Okay. All right. So price inelastic supply, okay, is when PES is less than 1. So here you can see, remember, the relationship between price and quantity supplied is positive. We know this from the law of supply. What happened here? Just give me a second. Sorry, it just my iPad may have disconnected. I'm going to reconnect it. Yep. Any second now, the code should pop up. And there we go. Fabulous. Let me share my screen. Once again, I apologize. Okay. Back. All right. So if the change in quantity supplied is less than proportionate, we don't say smaller than, we say less than proportionate to the change in price, supply is price inelastic. So here you can see a 10% rise in price led to only a 5% increase in quantity supplied, okay? Which means the increase in quantity supplied was less than proportionate to the increase in price. Here we say supply is price inelastic, and the PES will be less than 1. If the change in quantity supplied is more than proportionate to the change in price, we say supply is price elastic, and the price elasticity of supply will be greater than 1. So here you can see a 10% rise in price caused a 15% increase in quantity supplied. The increase in quantity supplied was more than proportionate to the increase in price. Okay? So these are the frequently encountered cases, and I'll talk about the determinants of PES in a second. And then you have some special cases. You have unit elastic supply, where PES is equal to 0. This is any supply curve that originates from the origin. Remember, any supply curve that originates from this point here, 0, will have unit elastic supply. If you don't believe me, you can draw a few supply curves that originate from the origin and calculate PES, and you'll see what I mean. Okay, this here, the percentage change in quantity supplied, is equal to the percentage change in price. Therefore, we say that here we say that changes in quantity supplied are proportionate to changes in price. Okay? All right, perfectly inelastic supply. Here, quantity supplied is completely independent of price. Whether price rises or falls, quantity supplied is fixed. It's fixed supply, right? Here, the PES is 0. There is 0 responsiveness. Quantity supplied does not respond to changes in price, okay? And perfectly elastic supply, PES is equal to infinity. Here, it's the opposite. So remember, in this case, quantity is fixed. In this case, price is fixed, okay? Price does not change whatever the quantity supplied is. Therefore, percentage change in quantity supplied divided by the percentage change in price gives you infinity. Why? Because this is equal to 0, and anything divided by 0 is a number that doesn't exist. It's infinity. Okay? So these are the sort of hypothetical cases. Now, what are the determinants of PES? The determinants of PES. What determines whether supply will be price elastic or price inelastic? The first thing is the level of spare capacity. Okay? If there is lots of spare capacity and the producer can afford to increase production and increase quantity supplied, supply will be price elastic, and PES will be greater than 1. If the producer is working at full capacity, which basically means 0 spare capacity, right? This producer is working at full capacity, right? Supply will be very price inelastic, maybe even perfectly inelastic. PES will be less than 1 because the producer is working at full capacity. So this is number 1. Number 2, the spare capacity. Number 2, the rate at which costs increase. Okay? If costs increase, so to increase production, in order to increase production, costs will not increase by much. Supply will be very elastic, so price elastic supply. In the case of a product where increasing quantity supplied isn't going to add up too much to the production costs. But if in order to increase production, costs will increase dramatically, in that case, maybe because the producer is at full capacity and they can't afford to maybe build a second factory or a second shop, right? Then in this case, supply will be very price inelastic, right? So think about it. If there's a small increase in costs versus a dramatic increase in costs, okay, in order to step up production and produce more, okay, the rate at which costs increase. Number three, spare capacity, rate at which costs increase. Number three is the period of time. In the short run, supply is very price inelastic, because for many products, you can't just increase or change production levels overnight, okay? While in the long run, on the other hand, supply, just like demand, becomes more elastic, okay? PES in the long run becomes greater than 1, while in the short run, PES is less than 1. Okay, so something to think about. So the spare capacity, rate at which costs increase, and period of time. There is one determinant I'm forgetting. I am absolutely sure. So give me a second. I'm going to refer back to the syllabus. I know there are 4, but I have completely forgotten that one. So please forgive me. I'm just going to refer. I mean, I know where it is in the syllabus, so don't panic. Just, just ignore me for a second. Determinants of PES. Oh, mobility. There we go. Unused capacity I talked about. Ability to store and the mobility of the factors of production. Thank you for allowing me this chance to cheat. Okay, so mobility of the FOPs. If the FOPs are mobile, whether geographically or occupationally, and you can move them around to producing at different locations or producing different products, if they are very mobile, if your FOPs are very mobile, supply will be more elastic. If your FOPs are immobile, right, you can't move them around or switch them from one product to another, then supply will be very inelastic. So think about it, right? Very mobile workers that you can move from a factory in New York to a factory in Detroit, for example, right? Well, if you have machines that can't be moved around, so think about it. Some factors of production are more mobile than others. If the product you're producing can be produced with very mobile factors of production, okay, your supply will be much more elastic. While if your factors of production are immobile, they're specialized in just this one thing. You can't switch production up a little bit, so your supply will be very inelastic. And the last one was mobility of the factors of production. Oh dear Lord, I am getting old. Oh, ability to store. Thank you very much. Ability to store. If this product is basically durable, product that you can store can be stored. Supply will be very elastic, right? Think of Apple producing iPads, right? iPads, you can produce them and just keep them in storage. And if the price of the iPad rises because there's an increase in demand, Apple can just respond by pulling iPads from storage in their inventory and selling them, right? While if the product is perishable, cannot be stored, supply will be very inelastic, right? Think of agricultural products and primary products that cannot really be stored from one season to the next. I mean, even if you put them in freezers, they still lose their freshness, right? So supply is very inelastic in the case of perishable products that cannot be stored. Don't confuse. Now, I noticed that many students, when they talk about PES, they use things like whether it's a necessity or a luxury. These are determinants of PED. Don't confuse the determinants of price elasticity of demand with the determinants of price elasticity of supply. They are very different, okay? So let's talk about primary products versus manufactured goods, okay? Primary products, or primary commodities, I should say, okay? Primary commodities tend to have low PED and low PES. Low PED because they tend to be necessities with very few or no substitutes. That's why they have inelastic demand, okay? Inelastic demand. They also tend to have inelastic supply for different reasons, because they tend to be perishable and or not easy to store, and they tend to cost a lot of money to extract or grow or mine or whatever. Okay? Manufactured goods, on the other hand, tend to have high PED and high PES for different reasons. High PED because they tend to have lots of close substitutes, and they tend to be more on the luxurious side of things. Obviously, there are exceptions. Okay, they tend to be luxuries rather than necessities. Obviously, there are exceptions. Okay, and they tend to have high PES because they tend to be durable and can be stored. And they tend to have high PES because the FOPs tend to be very mobile. Tend to be more mobile in manufacturing industries, right? So these are things you can think about applying the determinants of PED and PES. Okay, I have a video that explains this in a little bit more detail. If you'd like to know the link to the video, just leave me a comment or whatever. I have finished in this live stream. I reviewed, it wasn't ideal, but I reviewed price elasticity of demand, income elasticity of demand, and price elasticity of supply, using diagrams and talking about the determinants of all three. Thank you for your patience. I know I missed the Saturday, my regular time. I did have a family emergency, and I apologize for that. But I'll be back this Saturday at our regular time, which is 2 p.m. GMT, 10 a.m. on the East Coast if you live on the East Coast. Okay? Chor, you're absolutely welcome. Chor, I'm so glad. I'm sorry I missed the session on Saturday, and thank you for becoming a member. For those of you who want to support the channel, please consider becoming a member. The links and everything can be found in the video description. There's lots of access to exclusive content for members only. So please think about becoming a member and supporting the channel. Chor is one of my channel members. Thank you, Chor, for your membership, and I hope you are enjoying the exclusive content. And yeah, like, share, comment, subscribe, leave a thank you note, leave me any questions, and I do my best to answer all questions. And have a great rest of your afternoon, evening, wherever in the world you are, and I'll see you again on Saturday at our regular time. All right? You're welcome, Olga. Thank you very much, Chor. Have a great one. I'll talk to you later.